What if I told you your mind could be hacked without you even noticing? What if a warm smile, a friendly hug, or a simple invitation was the first move in a game designed to control you? The scariest part is it doesn't happen to weak people. It happens to smart, curious, everyday people who never see it coming. Right now, you might believe you're too aware, too rational, too strong-willed to ever fall into a cult-like trap. But by the end of this video, you'll realize just how terrifyingly easy it is. Because the first step doesn't look dangerous. It looks welcoming, feels like love, and that's why it works. So imagine this. A friend invites you to check out a group they've joined. Everyone there seems positive, full of energy, glowing with happiness. You walk in and suddenly you're surrounded by smiles, hugs, and eyes locked on you like you're the most important person in the room. In seconds, you feel like you've come home to a family you never knew you had. Feels magical, feels safe, but what you don't know is that you've just stepped into the trap. Here's the unsettling truth. The people who fall into cult-like systems are rarely gullible or foolish. They are usually intelligent, open-minded, and searching for something more in life. And that's exactly why it works. Because cult-like systems don't present themselves with chains and threats. They don't look like prisons. They look like havens. They don't push you away from your life. They slowly pull you closer to theirs until your world and their world become one and the same. The human brain loves shortcuts, craves certainty, patterns, and belonging. And when you're lost, lonely, or struggling with unanswered questions, you're vulnerable to any system that promises clarity. That's why the first move is almost always connection. Every human being wants to belong, to feel special, to be part of something bigger than themselves. And these groups know that desire better than anyone. From the moment you step into their world, you're showered with attention. Strangers greet you like your family. They lean in close, make eye contact, call you by your name as if you've known each other for years. You're told you're special, that you're exactly what the group has been waiting for. Compliments and affection roll in like waves. Feels incredible, but that feeling is engineered. It's not love, it's bait. The faster you feel connected, the faster you let your guard down. And while you're still basking in this new glow, the next layer begins. The promise. Someone shares their story, how they were broken, depressed, or lost until they found this place. Another explains how they were empty inside, and now every day feels like a gift. Everywhere you look, faces are glowing, voices are buzzing with excitement. Everyone seems transformed. And in your mind, a small, dangerous question whispers, what if this could be me? The truth is, most people carry hidden struggles. Pain, doubts, loneliness, secret fears. And when someone stands in front of you and claims to have the key to erase all of that, it feels impossible not to lean in. It's the oldest persuasion trick in the book. Show someone a before and after picture, then let them imagine themselves as the after. Hope becomes a hook, and once hope takes root, it's hard to shake. But here's where the trap tightens. These groups know not to overwhelm you. If they revealed their full belief system right away, you'd laugh or run. No one would stay. So instead, they feed it to you slowly, piece by piece, like a drip of water. First, it's just about community. Then it's about purpose. Then it's about a higher mission. Later, it's about sacrifice. Each step feels small, logical, almost harmless. But by the time you see the full picture, you're already entangled. You've already invested too much emotionally to walk away. It's like boiling a frog. Throw it in boiling water and it leaps out immediately. But place it in cool water and heat it slowly, and it never realizes what's happening until it's too late. That's how the mind capture begins. The most sinister part is that they don't start by asking for anything. Instead, they give free meals, free lessons, free counseling, free spiritual advice. You think, these people are so generous. But what's really happening is the creation of debt. The human brain is wired to hate imbalance. When someone gives us something, we feel a pull to give something back, even when we didn't ask for it. Psychologists call this the reciprocity principle. So later, when the group asks for your time, your money, or your loyalty, you'll feel a subtle obligation. You'll think, they helped me. The least I can do is help them. But what feels like kindness is actually leverage. And even if a small voice in your head says this feels too good to be true, that thought is drowned out. Because everything around you is consistent. Everyone is smiling. Everyone is united. Everyone speaks the same way, acts the same way, radiates the same energy. Our brains are wired to trust consistency. When all signals point in the same direction, we accept it as truth. The possibility of manipulation disappears. What you see feels authentic, even when it's rehearsed. Another subtle tactic comes in the form of pressure, but not the kind you expect. No threats, no yelling, just soft nudges wrapped in kindness. After your first visit, someone leans in and says, "When can we see you again?" Or, "You don't want to miss next week's meeting. It's going to be amazing." Feels like an invitation, but it's really an expectation. And if you hesitate, they don't get angry. They just look disappointed. That disappointment stings more than you realize, because you don't want to let down these people who have shown you nothing but warmth. So you come back, and with every return, the hook goes deeper. Then comes escalation. First, it's just a short evening meeting. Then it's a weekend retreat. Then volunteering your time. Then opening your wallet. Each step is small, but each step is bigger than the last. And the more you give, the harder it becomes to leave. This is the sunk cost trap. Once you've invested time, energy, or money, your brain resists admitting it was wasted. Instead, it convinces you to keep going, to dig deeper, to justify the sacrifice. Slowly, what began as a casual visit transforms into loyalty, and loyalty hardens into dependency. The story repeats over and over. One man attended a personal development seminar, thinking it was just motivational speeches and exercises. On day one, he was hooked by the energy, the sense of belonging. On day two, the exercises became more intense. People were pushed to cry, to confess secrets, to break down walls in front of strangers. On day three, the pressure mounted. He was told that if he left now, he'd never reach his full potential. But if he stayed, his life would change forever. He stayed, not just that weekend, but for years. The seminar became his world, draining his savings, his energy, even his identity. And all of it began with something as simple as a friendly invitation. That's how fast it happens. That's how subtle the first steps can be. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. You think it could never be you, but it could. Could be anyone. Because these tactics don't only exist in cults. They exist in high-pressure sales pitches, in toxic relationships, in manipulative workplaces, in political rallies. Different packaging, same mechanics. The first smile, the first compliment, the first invitation. These things aren't always innocent. Sometimes they're calculated opening moves in a psychological chess game designed to capture your mind. That's why it's so important to recognize the beginning of the trap. Because once you're inside, the tactics change. It's no longer about pulling you in. It's about cutting you off from the outside world. That's where the real prison begins. And once you see how that prison is built, you'll understand why some people never escape. You've taken the first step. You've felt the warmth, the love, the promises. You've gone to a meeting, maybe two, maybe more. You're hooked by the energy, the sense of belonging. But now the tactics begin to shift. The smiles are still there. The kindness still flows. But underneath it all, something more deliberate is happening. The group is no longer just inviting you in. They're quietly pulling you away from everything else. This is where isolation begins. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, careful, almost invisible. That's why it works. The first move is subtle. They encourage you to spend more time with them. At first, it feels like enthusiasm. They tell you how important the next meeting will be, how much you'll get out of the next retreat, how the group just isn't the same without you. And you believe them because you've never felt so wanted before. Every invitation feels like a compliment. But every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else. No to dinner with friends. No to family gatherings. No to free weekends. Without realizing it, your world begins to shrink. Isolation rarely looks like someone locking you in a room. Instead, it feels like choosing to be with the people who get you. The group frames outsiders as people who don't understand, who might never support the new, better version of you. It starts with innocent comments. Your family might not get this yet, but give them time. Or, friends can be negative. They'll try to pull you back to your old ways. Little seeds planted in your mind. Seeds of doubt about the people you love. And slowly, you begin to question who's really on your side. The next stage is reframing the outside world as dangerous, corrupt, or toxic. The group becomes your safe haven, your refuge from everything that's wrong. With society, it's us versus them. And every story they tell reinforces the idea that the outside is filled with lost, misguided people who will never understand. Once you accept this framing, every disagreement with a friend or relative becomes proof. They say you're changing, you think, of course they'd say that they don't get it. They're not awake. And just like that, the ties begin to fray. Isolation isn't always physical. Most of the time, it's psychological. Even if you're still living in your old house, still going to your job, still seeing your family, the group has already built a wall in your mind. The people you used to trust feel distant. Their opinions carry less weight. Their concerns sound like noise. And the more you believe the group holds the truth, the less space there is for anyone else. But over time, the physical isolation creeps in too. More meetings, more retreats, more volunteer hours. You don't notice how little time you spend with anyone else until it's too late. Your phone rings and you ignore it. Your old friends stop inviting you because you always say no. Your family sees less and less of you because you're busy with the group. What once felt like choice has turned into habit. And that habit has turned into control. There's another layer to this. The group uses your own loyalty against you. They tell you that outsiders will never understand the sacred bond you share here. They call it a family, a brotherhood, a chosen circle. And the more you believe in this inner circle, the more guilty you feel when you spend time away from it. Hanging out with old friends suddenly feels like betrayal. Talking openly with family feels like weakness. The group is training you to censor yourself, to distance yourself, to live in two worlds, theirs and everyone else's. And slowly, their world becomes the only one that matters. A chilling trick they use is to turn your doubts into proof that you need them. Let's say you start to wonder if this is all too much. Maybe you feel uneasy about skipping a family dinner or missing work for another meeting. If you voice these doubts, they don't dismiss you. They reframe it. They say, "That's your old self resisting growth." Or, "That's negativity trying to hold you back." Instead of seeing doubt as a warning sign, you start to see it as weakness. Weakness that only the group can help you overcome. Every doubt becomes a reason to dive deeper. One of the most powerful forms of isolation is language. Groups develop their own phrases, their own inside jokes, their own vocabulary. At first it seems harmless, even fun. You feel like you're part of an inner circle because you understand the code. But the more you use their language, the more distant you sound to people outside. Your conversations with outsiders feel strained because they don't understand the terms. And slowly, words that once connected you to the world now set you apart. Language becomes a barrier, and that barrier keeps you in. It's important to realize that isolation doesn't feel like isolation while it's happening. It feels like connection. Feels like belonging. You're constantly surrounded by people. You're busier than ever. Your days are full of activity. Your nights are full of laughter. Your calendar is overflowing. On the surface, you're more connected than ever before. But in reality, you're connected only to one thing, them. Everything else has been cut away. The most dangerous part of this process is that you don't notice it. If someone tried to isolate you overnight, you'd resist. But when it happens slowly, in small steps, it feels natural. You think you're choosing it. You think you're just prioritizing what matters most. You don't realize that your choices are being shaped, nudged, guided by subtle pressure. And by the time you see the pattern, the damage is already done. There's a reason isolation is so effective. Humans are social creatures. Our sense of reality is shaped by the people around us. When you're surrounded by a variety of perspectives, it's easier to question things. But when every voice around you says the same thing, your reality shifts. What once seemed extreme now feels normal. What once seemed impossible now feels inevitable. Isolation isn't just about keeping you away from others. It's about controlling the voices in your head until the only voice that matters is theirs. History is full of examples. In notorious cults, one of the first steps was moving members into shared houses or compounds. The isolation was physical, total, unavoidable. But in modern groups, it can be much subtler. They don't need to build walls around you. They just need to fill your schedule, guide your thoughts, and make outsiders seem irrelevant. And in time, the effect is the same. One man described how it happened to him. At first, he just attended weekly meetings. Then, he started volunteering on weekends. Before long, he was spending almost every night at the group's headquarters. He didn't notice that his old friends had drifted away. He didn't notice that his family had stopped calling. By the time he realized how isolated he was, the group had become his only support system. Leaving didn't feel like walking away from a group. It felt like walking into emptiness. And that's the ultimate weapon of isolation. It makes leaving unthinkable. Because once the group replaces your family, your friends, your community, your purpose, leaving feels like suicide. You're not just giving up an activity. You're giving up your entire world. And most people, when faced with that choice, stay. This is why isolation is so dangerous. It doesn't just cut you off from others. It rewires your reality until the group becomes the only anchor you have left. And once that happens, the prison door slams shut. But here's the thing. Isolation is only the beginning. Because once you're cut off from the outside world, once the group becomes your only reality, the next stage begins. Now they can introduce the figure at the center of it all. The one person everyone looks up to. The one whose words matter more than anything. The charismatic leader. The Messiah. And that's where the grip tightens beyond belief. You've been welcomed. You've been loved. You've been slowly pulled away from the outside world. Your old friends feel distant. Your family doesn't understand. Your entire sense of belonging now lives inside this circle. And just when you feel completely immersed, the spotlight turns to one person. At first, you may not even notice it. The group talks about their values, their purpose, their mission. But sooner or later, the conversation always comes back to the same name. The leader, the guide, the visionary. It could be a man in flowing robes, a woman with a soothing voice, or even someone who looks completely ordinary. The packaging doesn't matter. What matters is the power they hold over the group and, eventually, over you. The leader is the centerpiece of the entire system. Without them, the group is just a collection of people. With them, the group becomes a movement. And from the very beginning, every word, every smile, every gesture is designed to make you see them as more than human. The first impression is carefully staged. You're told stories of how wise they are, how they've helped countless people, how they've suffered and risen above it all. When you finally meet them, it doesn't feel like meeting a person. It feels like meeting destiny. Their presence feels magnetic, like gravity pulling you closer. They don't just speak to the room, they speak to you. Somehow, their words echo your deepest fears and your hidden desires. You feel seen in a way you never have before. This isn't an accident. Charismatic leaders know how to read people. They know how to hold eye contact just long enough to feel intimate but not uncomfortable. They know how to use pauses, tone, and rhythm to make their words sink in. They know how to sprinkle just enough mystery into their answers to make you want more. And most importantly, they know how to position themselves as the bridge between your pain and your hope. Think about it. Every group starts by offering you belonging. Then they isolate you. But belonging isn't enough to keep people forever. People need a symbol, a figure, something tangible to pour their devotion into. That's the leader's role. They become the living proof that transformation is possible. They embody the after picture you're desperate to reach. And because they appear larger than life, you begin to trust them more than yourself. The danger of charismatic authority is that it bypasses logic. Normally, we judge someone by their actions, their results, their consistency. But charisma short-circuits that process. When someone radiates confidence, when they speak with certainty, when they carry themselves like they were born to lead, our brains are wired to follow. Psychologists call it the halo effect. If someone seems impressive in one area, we assume they must be impressive in others. If they sound wise, we assume they must be moral. If they look confident, we assume they must be right. And once that switch flips, every word they speak carries more weight than it should. A casual comment becomes wisdom. A vague prediction becomes prophecy. A stern warning becomes law. And because the group reinforces it, nodding, clapping, cheering, you start to doubt yourself before you'd ever doubt them. It doesn't matter if the leader contradicts themselves, if their stories don't add up, if their rules seem unfair. You find ways to justify it. You think, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there's a deeper meaning I can't see yet. The leader doesn't lose credibility, you do. Your doubts are reframed as your own weakness, your lack of understanding. And the more you doubt yourself, the stronger their grip becomes. Charismatic leaders also use vulnerability as a weapon. They might tell stories of their suffering, their childhood pain, their battles with doubt. And as you listen, you feel a bond. You think they're just like me. But watch closely. Every story of weakness ends with triumph. Every scar becomes proof of their wisdom. They present themselves as both human and superhuman at the same time. Human enough to connect with you, superhuman enough to lead you. That duality is intoxicating. There's another layer, exclusivity. The leader is not always accessible. Sometimes they appear only at special events, retreats, or closed sessions. This scarcity makes them even more powerful. Every glimpse feels like a privilege. Every word feels like a rare gift. And if you're one of the chosen few who gets closer access, you feel special, elevated, important. That's not an accident. It's a design. The leader controls access to themselves because scarcity amplifies devotion. Once you're hooked, the leader's approval becomes everything. A single smile feels like sunlight. A single frown feels like a storm. You start to shape your behavior around what you think will please them. And because they know this, they use it to mold you. They praise you when you conform. They withhold approval when you resist. Slowly, their opinion of you becomes more important than your own. You don't just follow them. You measure your worth by how they see you. It's chilling when you realize how similar this dynamic is across history. From cult leaders to dictators, from self-proclaimed prophets to corporate tyrants, the formula repeats. Charisma, exclusivity, authority, approval, each piece carefully placed, to create an illusion of godlike power. And the more people believe it, the stronger it becomes. Because charisma is contagious. Once the crowd adores the leader, you feel pressure to adore them too. If everyone else is clapping, cheering, crying, who are you to resist? To doubt them is to risk being the outsider again. And after everything you've sacrificed, you can't afford that. There's a reason charismatic leaders are so dangerous. They don't just control what you do. They control how you feel about yourself. They become the lens through which you see the world. If they say you're strong, you believe it. If they say you're weak, you accept it. If they say you're chosen, you feel chosen. If they say you're lost without them, you believe it with your whole heart. And once that belief sets in, logic doesn't stand a chance. Imagine a person who has been cut off from their family, surrounded only by group members, immersed in endless praise for the leader. Their identity has been chipped away, their confidence dismantled, their doubts reframed as weakness. Then imagine that leader standing in front of them, telling them that sacrifice is the path to salvation. Do you see how easily they say yes? Not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to see that yes as the only choice. This conditioning doesn't just happen in cult compounds or secret societies. It happens in plain sight, in marketing, in politics, in workplaces. Anytime someone uses charisma to bypass logic and create loyalty, the same mechanics are at play. You see it in rallies where crowds chant in unison. You see it in companies where employees worship a CEO like a savior. You see it in relationships where one partner dominates the other with charm and authority. Different settings, same psychology. The leader effect is so powerful because it exploits one of our deepest instincts, the need for guidance. Life is uncertain, chaotic, full of choices. Most people crave someone who seems to have the answers. A leader who says, "Follow me, I'll take you where you need to go." And when someone radiates that certainty, it's almost impossible not to follow, especially when the alternative is facing life's chaos alone. But here's the twist. Once the leader has your devotion, once your reality is filtered through their authority, they don't need to convince you anymore. You convince yourself. You reinterpret their words as wisdom, even when they make no sense. You excuse their cruelty as discipline, their greed as generosity, their contradictions as mystery. The leader doesn't have to hold the chains. You build them yourself. This is the terrifying genius of the charismatic leader. They don't just lead a group. They live inside your mind. And once they're there, it's almost impossible to get them out. But charisma and authority alone aren't enough to keep people under control forever. To tighten the grip, the leader needs more than devotion. They need emotional weapons, tools that bypass logic and speak directly to the most primal parts of the human brain. Fear, guilt, shame, desire. These aren't just feelings. In the wrong hands, they are weapons of mass manipulation. And once they're unleashed, the prison walls grow even higher. By now, the trap has closed in tighter. You've been isolated from the outside world. You've been guided toward a leader who feels larger than life, someone you can't help but trust. You've started to measure yourself through their approval. But there's still one problem for the group. Devotion built on charisma alone can fade. People's excitement wears off. Doubts creep in. And that's when the emotional weapons come out. These weapons aren't physical. They're psychological. And they're far more effective because they target the deepest parts of the human brain, the parts that override logic, reason, and even survival instincts. The three most common are fear, guilt, and shame. Let's start with fear. Fear is the most primal emotion humans have. It kept our ancestors alive in dangerous environments, warning them of predators and threats. But in the hands of manipulators, fear becomes a leash. It's not about physical danger. It's about psychological danger, the terror of what will happen if you ever leave the group. The group might warn you of catastrophic consequences. If you walk away, your life will fall apart. If you turn your back on us, you'll be cursed. If you reject this path, you'll lose everything you've gained. The threats vary, but the message is the same. The world outside is unsafe, and only we can protect you. Sometimes the fear is cosmic. You're told that leaving means damnation, bad karma, eternal suffering. Sometimes it's more personal. Financial ruin, broken relationships, spiritual emptiness. And the genius of fear is that it doesn't need to be proven. Your brain fills in the blanks. Even if you don't fully believe it, the possibility gnaws at you. What if they're right? What if leaving really does destroy everything? That what if is enough to keep you in place. Then comes guilt. Guilt is different from fear. Fear warns you about the future. Guilt chains you to the past. It's the voice that says, "You owe us. You owe the group for welcoming you. You owe the leader for guiding you. You owe the cause for giving your life meaning." And every sacrifice you've made, the money you've given, the hours you've devoted, the relationships you've lost becomes part of the debt. Walking away doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like betrayal. Manipulators know this, so they build guilt into the system. They remind you of all the people who are still lost outside the group. They tell you that leaving means abandoning them. They make you feel responsible for spreading the message, saving souls, growing the movement. And if you fail, if you even think of stepping away, the weight of that guilt crushes you. You're not just letting yourself down. You're letting everyone down. But the sharpest weapon of all is shame. Shame is not just about what you've done. It's about who you are. And once shame takes root, it doesn't just control your actions. It rewires your identity. Groups use shame by making you believe you're fundamentally flawed without them. They highlight your weaknesses, your doubts, your mistakes. They tell you that your old life was worthless, that you were broken, lost, or sinful before you joined. And then they frame the group and the leader as the only reason you have value now. It's a devastating cycle. They tear you down to build you up. They make you believe you're nothing on your own, but chosen, special, and redeemed when you obey. This makes shame a cage with no door. Even if you want to leave, you believe you don't deserve anything outside the group. You tell yourself, who would I even be without them? Think about how powerful this triad is. Fear paralyzes you. Guilt chains you. Shame erases you. Together, they form an emotional prison that doesn't need walls. You stay inside not because you're forced to, but because you're convinced you can't survive anywhere else. Psychologists call this trauma bonding. The group or leader creates cycles of punishment and reward, fear and comfort, shame and acceptance. One moment you're told you're special, chosen, loved. The next, you're reminded you're weak, flawed, dependent. The highs and lows fuse together until your sense of self is tied to the group's approval. You chase the highs to escape the lows, never realizing you're trapped in the cycle. Let's break it down with a chilling example. Imagine you're praised in front of the group for your dedication. The leader says you're an example to others. You feel euphoric, like you finally belong. But the next week, you miss a meeting. Suddenly, the warmth vanishes. The leader frowns. The group looks disappointed. You're told that you've slipped, that your absence let everyone down. That shame burns deeper than any punishment. And so, you push yourself harder, desperate to win back approval. This cycle is intentional. It ensures you never feel stable, never feel enough on your own. You're always chasing the next approval, always fearing the next disappointment. And in that chase, your freedom disappears. What's even more sinister is how these tactics get internalized. After enough repetition, the leader doesn't have to shame you anymore. You shame yourself. You hear their voice in your head, criticizing every slip, questioning every doubt. You police your own thoughts because you've been trained to believe that even thinking the wrong thing is betrayal. This is called thought reform, and once it takes hold, the battle isn't outside anymore. It's inside you. Notice how these emotions work together. Fear keeps you from leaving. Guilt keeps you tied to the group. Shame convinces you you're nothing without them. And all three combine to make the cage invisible. From the outside, people wonder, why don't they just walk away? But from the inside, walking away feels like death. That's why these tactics are so effective. They bypass logic. You can argue with a bad idea, but you can't argue with the feeling that you're worthless without the group. You can resist someone's words, but you can't resist the terror of eternal punishment. You can question authority, but you can't question the crushing guilt of abandoning the people you love. This is how groups keep control long after the initial excitement fades. This is why people stay in systems that exploit them, even when they know something is wrong. Because fear, guilt, and shame are chains you can't see. And chains you can't see are the hardest to break. But here's where it gets darker. Once these emotions are firmly planted, the group doesn't stop there. They don't just want your loyalty. They want your mind. They want to control how you think, how you interpret reality itself. And to do that, they use something even more insidious. Thought-stopping techniques, mental control strategies, and constant reframing of reality. This is where your own thoughts are turned against you. And once that happens, escape becomes almost impossible. By now, you've been pulled in by belonging. You've been cut off from the outside world. You've been dazzled by the charisma of the leader. You've been chained by fear, guilt, and shame. But there's still one final frontier the group must conquer: your mind. Because even if you're isolated, even if you're scared, even if you feel guilty, there's still one place where rebellion can spark: your own thoughts. A single doubt, a single critical question, a single flash of clarity can unravel the entire illusion. And the leaders know this. That's why they build systems to control not just your behavior, not just your emotions, but the way you think. This is thought control. It doesn't look like brainwashing the way movies show it. There are no flashing lights or hypnosis chambers. Thought control is subtle. It's embedded in language, in rituals, in the way you're trained to respond to your own mind. And once it takes root, you don't need anyone watching you. You become your own guard. One of the most common techniques is called thought stopping. It's deceptively simple. Anytime a doubt creeps in, you're taught to replace it with something else. Prayer, a mantra, a slogan, a memorized phrase from the leader. At first, it feels harmless, even comforting. You think, I'm just focusing on the positive. But what's really happening is that you're training yourself not to think critically. Every time a dangerous thought emerges, you slam the mental brakes. Over time, The reflex becomes automatic. Doubt arises, mantra replaces it, and the doubt disappears before it has a chance to grow. The brilliance and the horror of this is that it feels like self-discipline. You believe you're protecting your mind. You believe you're staying pure. But in reality, you're building a wall around your own thoughts. A prison inside your head. Another tool of thought control is language. Remember how groups create their own phrases and vocabulary. This isn't just about belonging. It's about shaping how you interpret reality. Psychologists call this loaded language. Words are stripped of their original meaning and redefined according to the group's worldview. Outsiders aren't just outsiders. They're sleepers, unawakened, sinners, the enemy. Doubts aren't doubts. They're attacks, tests, trials. Questioning isn't thinking. It's rebellion, ego, or sin. The effect of this is devastating. Once your language is hijacked, your thoughts are hijacked too. You can't even describe your experience without using their terms. And if you can't describe it, you can't analyze it. You can't escape it. Then there's constant reframing. Every event, every emotion, every failure is reinterpreted through the group's lens. If something good happens, it's proof the system works. If something bad happens, it's proof you didn't obey hard enough. No matter what you experience, the conclusion is always the same. The group is right and you need them more. This creates what psychologists call a closed system of logic. No evidence can ever disprove the group. Every path of reasoning leads back to obedience. It's like a maze with no exit. You run and run, but every tunnel brings you back to the same place. And the more you try to think your way out, the deeper you get lost. To reinforce this, the group creates rituals of confession. Members are encouraged or pressured to share their doubts, sins, and weaknesses publicly. On the surface, it looks like honesty and growth. But in reality, it's training you to police yourself. By exposing your thoughts, you give the group ammunition to shame you, to remind you of your flaws, to make you dependent on their forgiveness. And when you see others confessing, crying, repenting, you absorb the message. Doubting is dangerous. Questioning is weakness. The only safe path is obedience. There's another tactic that makes thought control nearly impossible to resist: information control. Once you're immersed in the group, outside sources are framed as corrupt, misleading, even dangerous. Books, media, conversations, anything that contradicts the group is dismissed as lies. And because you're already isolated, you don't have much access to outside perspectives anyway. The little you do see is easy to dismiss. You tell yourself, of course they say that they don't understand. Your reality becomes airtight, sealed from contradiction. At this point, your mind is not your own. You still feel like you're thinking. You still feel like you're choosing. But the menu of choices has been rewritten. The categories of thought have been rearranged. Even your doubts are anticipated and neutralized before they fully form. The system doesn't just control your answers, it controls the questions you're allowed to ask. This is why people trapped in cult-like systems often seem unreachable from the outside. Friends and family beg them to listen, to see reason, to wake up. But their minds are wrapped in protective armor. Every plea is reinterpreted as proof of the group's warnings. Every attempt at rescue is reframed as an attack. The harder you try to pull them out, the deeper they retreat into the mental fortress the group has built. And the most sinister part? You don't feel brainwashed. You feel free. You feel enlightened, awakened, chosen. You believe you've finally discovered the truth, when in reality the truth has been carefully edited, stripped, rewritten, and fed back to you in bite-sized pieces. You're not seeing the world clearly. You're seeing it through a lens designed by someone else. History shows us chilling examples of this. In one group, members were trained to repeat phrases like, "Doubt is death. Doubt is poison." Anytime they questioned the leader, they whispered the phrase to themselves until the doubt disappeared. In another, members were told that any negative thought came from evil forces outside the group. So instead of examining their doubts, they fought them like enemies. In yet another, members were kept so busy with study sessions, chanting, and rituals that they never had time to think deeply at all. Their days were filled from morning until midnight, leaving no mental space for rebellion. Different methods, same result. Your thoughts no longer belong to you. It's worth pausing to understand just how powerful this is. Human beings can endure isolation, fear, even pain if they can hold onto their thoughts. But once your own mind becomes the enemy, escape feels impossible. If you can't trust your doubts, if you can't rely on your own reason, then you're completely at the mercy of the system. That's why thought control is the ultimate weapon. It doesn't just trap your body, it traps your soul. But here's the dark genius of it. Thought control doesn't feel like control. It feels like clarity. It feels like freedom. It feels like you've finally found answers to the questions that haunted you all your life. And that illusion of freedom is what makes it so hard to break. Because why would you try to escape when you believe you're already free? This is the point where the group no longer has to push you. You push yourself. You censor yourself. You interpret your world the way they've trained you to. You carry their voice inside your head. And even if you walk away physically, the mental chains often remain for years. Survivors talk about how long it takes to silence the inner voice of the leader, to unlearn the reflexes of guilt, to allow themselves to think freely again. That's the lasting scar of thought control. But as dark as this is, the system has even more layers. Thought control builds the prison. But what happens when people inside the prison start noticing cracks? What happens when members begin whispering doubts to each other? Or when the outside world threatens to expose the truth? That's when the group deploys its next weapon, the us versus them mentality. A psychological war that divides the world into two camps, the pure and the corrupt, the enlightened and the lost, the insiders and the outsiders. And once that war is declared, reality itself fractures in ways that are almost impossible to heal. By now, the group has mastered your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Fear, guilt, and shame keep you in line. Mantras, rituals, and loaded language have rewritten your mind. But there's still one final tool left in the manipulator's arsenal: the creation of an enemy. Humans are tribal by nature. We look for patterns, allies, and threats. We instinctively categorize the world into friend and foe. Cult-like systems exploit this instinct, turning it into a psychological weapon. They don't just build loyalty to the group. They build hatred, suspicion, and fear of everyone else. They divide the world into two camps, us and them. It begins subtly. Outside perspectives are framed as misguided or uninformed. News, social media, books, even casual conversations are labeled as dangerous distractions. Slowly, you begin to doubt the intentions of everyone who isn't part of the group. Friends, family, colleagues, all potential threats. And the more isolated you become, the stronger this division grows. Soon, the rhetoric escalates. Outsiders are no longer just uninformed. They are evil, corrupt, or hostile. Their opinions aren't merely different, they are dangerous. This framing is powerful because it taps into your survival instincts. When your brain senses a threat, it triggers fight or flight responses. In a state of chronic alertness, you begin to perceive even neutral information as a personal attack. Now imagine combining this fear with the manipulative emotional weapons you've already experienced. You already fear leaving the group. You already feel guilt and shame at even considering dissent. And now, every glance, every word, every story from the outside world becomes a reinforcement of the group's narrative. The world is unsafe, and we are the only protection. The genius and terror of this tactic is that it creates dependency. The more the group paints the outside as dangerous, the more you cling to insiders. You don't just follow the rules, you defend the system. You attack anyone who questions it. You become the group's enforcer in your own mind. Even when alone, you're on guard, ready to reject outside lies before they can penetrate your thoughts. This isn't limited to direct enemies. Sometimes the enemy is abstract. You may be told that the system is corrupt, that society is decayed, or that the world is blind to the truth. These enemies are faceless, omnipresent, and unknowable. You can't confront them directly, so your attention and energy remain locked on the group and its mission. Every action you take, from fundraising to recruitment to defending the group online, feels justified as part of a battle against the enemy. Another layer is moral superiority. When the outside world is corrupt, the group becomes morally righteous. You're not just a member. You're a warrior for truth, a savior among the lost. This gives obedience a halo. Following rules isn't a punishment. It's a duty. Questioning the leader isn't rebellion. It's betrayal of the cause. And the more the group highlights its own purity, the deeper your psychological chains sink. Social pressure compounds the effect. In group settings, you see everyone else echoing the us versus them narrative. Peer approval reinforces the belief that outsiders are dangerous. Social isolation magnifies the anxiety of dissent. If you even whisper doubt, you risk ridicule, ostracism, or punishment. Over time, this creates a collective mentality where critical thinking is replaced by loyalty. Your brain learns that the easiest, safest path is to adopt the group's worldview entirely and defend it aggressively. The manipulative power of the us versus them mindset doesn't end there. It rewires your emotions. You may start to feel disgust toward outsiders, paranoia about their intentions, or even anger that simmers beneath the surface. These emotions serve as a self-reinforcing loop. Anger at the outside world makes you cling harder to the group. Fear of the outside world makes you obey more strictly. Guilt and shame about your own doubts make you confess and conform. Every reaction is absorbed, amplified, and redirected back into the group's control. And it doesn't have to be dramatic or violent to be effective. Even casual statements like, "People outside don't understand," or "They'll never see the truth," are powerful. These lines repeatedly tell your brain that the safe zone is inside the group and that danger waits at every boundary. In fact, the threat doesn't even have to be real. It only has to be believable. Our minds naturally fill in the gaps, creating vivid threats out of half-truths, rumors, or abstract warnings. At its core, this strategy is about dependency. Once you believe the outside world is dangerous, you cannot survive without the group. You no longer leave for freedom. You stay for safety. You don't just follow orders. You defend them. You don't just accept teachings. You evangelize them. And the longer you stay, the more the us versus them lens reshapes your worldview, until leaving feels like stepping off a cliff into a hostile abyss. History offers countless examples. Entire cults have mobilized members against governments, media, family members, even neighbors, convincing them that everyone outside the inner circle was plotting harm. Members who might have been rational, kind, and educated in the outside world became unrecognizable, paranoid, aggressive, and fanatically loyal. And all it took was a narrative of division, reinforced daily, combined with the emotional and cognitive tools already in place. Even when cracks appear, doubts, inconsistencies, mistakes by leaders, the us versus them mindset absorbs them. Any failures are blamed on the outside world. The enemy is always the explanation for setbacks, the justification for sacrifice, the reason your suffering makes sense. You're taught to rationalize pain, disappointment, and oppression not as flaws in the system, but as proof of its necessity. It's a brilliant trap. By turning the outside world into a threat, the group doesn't just hold you inside. It converts your own mind into a defender of the cage. You become complicit in your own manipulation. You police yourself, you police others, you even attack outsiders, all while believing you're doing the right thing. And in this mental battlefield, reason itself becomes the enemy. The terrifying result is complete psychological enclosure. You're not just following rules. You're thinking, feeling, and perceiving as the group wants you to. Your world shrinks to the size of the inner circle, and every thought about leaving or questioning triggers fear, guilt, or shame. You've been trained to see the world as divided, dangerous, and corrupt, and the group is the only oasis in that wasteland. By now, it's clear why cults and manipulative systems succeed even in modern, educated societies. Logic, facts, and evidence are powerless against a mind that has been rewired to fear, to obey, and to demonize the outside world. Control is not imposed, it's internalized. And the most terrifying part? You often believe you arrived at these conclusions yourself. This is why psychological manipulation is called dark art. It's not just influence, it's mental architecture. It's about building a reality so convincing, so emotionally charged, and so socially reinforced that your brain itself becomes a prison. And the us versus them mindset is the scaffolding, the invisible walls that keep you enclosed, loyal, and unquestioning. It's one thing to discuss theory, rituals, and manipulation in the abstract. It's another to see it in action. Real-world examples show just how pervasive and insidious these tactics can be. And the more you recognize them, the more you realize that mind control isn't confined to isolated cults in the woods. It exists everywhere, often hiding in plain sight. Take, for instance, high-demand religious sections. These groups often combine charisma, ritual, and strict social hierarchy to create complete control over members. Leaders position themselves as the ultimate authority, interpreting truth, morality, and purpose. Members are taught to question themselves, not the leader. Daily routines are structured to minimize independent thought. Study sessions, communal chores, prayers, or chants fill every hour. The outside world is portrayed as dangerous, weak, or immoral. Every interaction reinforces loyalty, obedience, and fear of leaving. Members may isolate from family, friends, and media, effectively sealing themselves inside the group's psychological ecosystem. But similar tactics exist outside overtly religious contexts. Corporations, for example, sometimes use psychological levers reminiscent of cults. Consider the onboarding process at high-pressure tech startups or multi-level marketing companies. New recruits are bombarded with language about vision, family, or mission. They are asked to commit to long hours, constantly optimize their performance, and prioritize the organization above personal life. Social approval is tightly controlled. Praise and recognition are given for compliance, while dissent is discouraged, ridiculed, or penalized. Groupthink emerges, creating a feedback loop where questioning the system feels risky. These environments can subtly condition employees to override personal judgment in favor of organizational goals, a professional echo of obedience and thought control. Even social media and online communities employ manipulative psychological techniques. Algorithms prioritize content that triggers strong emotions: outrage, fear, and tribal loyalty. Communities form around shared beliefs, often framing outsiders as hostile or misinformed. Memes, slogans, and catchphrases create shared language and reinforce identity. Repetition and social reinforcement make these communities psychologically compelling. Individuals often adopt the group's worldview with little conscious realization, defending ideas and leaders automatically. This mirrors the thought control and us versus the mindset we explored earlier. The difference is scale. Online, millions of people can be influenced simultaneously, often without physical isolation. Historical examples reinforce the danger of these tactics. The infamous People's Temple, led by Jim Jones, combined charismatic leadership, social isolation, fear, and ritualized obedience. Members were gradually cut off from family and the outside world. They were made to confess perceived sins publicly, internalizing guilt and dependence on the leader. The final act, the mass suicide murder in Jonestown, was the horrifying culmination of decades of psychological manipulation. Members didn't act under simple coercion. They had been mentally conditioned to believe that obedience was the only path to salvation. Similarly, the Branch Davidians under David Koresh relied on isolation, loaded language, ritualized study, and the framing of outsiders as threats to maintain control. Koresh's followers lived under strict rules, devoted themselves entirely to his teachings, and defended the group against both internal doubt and external pressure. Thought control, emotional leverage, and an ever-present enemy narrative created a climate where leaving or questioning was psychologically unthinkable. Modern iterations aren't always this extreme, but the principles remain consistent. For example, some online self-improvement or entrepreneurial guru communities use the same mechanics. Charismatic leaders, repetitive slogans, emotional triggers, and social reinforcement. Members are isolated from critical perspectives, encouraged to invest significant time and money, and made to feel that leaving equates to failure, moral weakness, or ignorance. The parallels with classic cults are striking. Even political movements can exploit similar psychological levers. Leaders use repeated messaging, emotionally charged language, and social pressure to cultivate loyalty. Outsiders are framed as enemies, dissenters are labeled as traitors, and members are incentivized to police their own thoughts and the behavior of others. Tribalism, fear, and moral superiority are leveraged to maintain control. The techniques aren't always hidden. They operate openly, but the principles mirror the dark arts of manipulation we've discussed for decades. These real-world examples reveal a chilling truth. Mind control is not a relic of the past. It's not just confined to charismatic cult leaders in remote locations. The same psychological tactics appear in modern corporations, social media platforms, online communities, political movements, and self-help circles. They adapt to context, but the underlying mechanics are constant. Isolation, emotional leverage, repetitive language, thought control, and the creation of enemies. One of the most powerful lessons from these cases is how gradual and insidious the process can be. People rarely realize they're being manipulated until they are deeply entrenched. Control doesn't arrive overnight. It creeps in layer by layer until members are fully invested, defensively loyal, and resistant to outside perspectives. It's not just a battle of ideas. It's a battle for the mind itself. Consider the concept of normalization. When manipulative practices are introduced gradually, they become part of daily life. Over time, extreme measures feel normal. Isolation feels protective. Blind obedience feels virtuous. Questioning feels dangerous. The mind adapts, rationalizes, and internalizes the group's worldview. Once the pattern is established, leaving the system becomes emotionally and psychologically daunting. Even rational thinking alone is insufficient to counter years of conditioning. The final insight is the role of social reinforcement. Humans are social creatures, and group pressure is incredibly powerful. Repetition, approval, and the fear of rejection create a self-reinforcing cycle. Members don't just comply because they fear punishment. They comply because compliance is rewarding socially and emotionally. This principle underpins many forms of modern influence. Marketing campaigns, workplace cultures, and social movements all exploit social dynamics to shape behavior and thought. By studying these real-world examples, we can start to recognize the signs. Rigid hierarchies, charismatic leaders, social isolation, emotionally charged language, enemy narratives, and ritualized behaviors. Awareness is the first step in resisting manipulation. While the tactics are powerful, they are not invincible. The mind can recover, especially when exposed to critical thinking, supportive social networks, and alternative perspectives. Understanding the subtle and pervasive nature of these tactics is crucial. Whether it's a cult, a corporation, or an online community, the mechanics of control are surprisingly consistent. Awareness, vigilance, and self-reflection are the most effective defenses. The more you recognize these patterns, the less likely you are to be ensnared, and the more you can protect your mental autonomy in a world full of hidden influence. Every mind has weaknesses. Every personality has vulnerabilities. And skilled manipulators know exactly where to look, how to probe, and how to exploit them. Control isn't random. It's precise, targeted, and often invisible. It begins with observation. Manipulators watch closely, often for weeks, months, or even years. They notice patterns in behavior, emotional triggers, and recurring insecurities. A compliment that makes someone feel special, a subtle challenge that sparks defensiveness, a reassurance offered at just the right moment. All of these are carefully timed to deepen influence. The manipulator is patient. They wait for openings, for cracks in self-confidence, for moments of emotional susceptibility. Some people are naturally trusting, making them easier to ensnare through flattery, shared secrets, or appeals to empathy. Others crave approval and belonging, which can be manipulated by creating exclusivity, inside knowledge, or secret rituals. Still others fear conflict and rejection, which can be exploited through guilt, shame, or veiled threats. Every personality trait, from kindness to ambition, can be twisted into a lever of control. A powerful tool in this process is the mirroring of personality. Manipulators subtly reflect your values, interests, and beliefs back at you, creating the illusion of deep understanding. This technique builds instant rapport and trust. You feel seen, understood, and validated. But the effect is deceptive. By mirroring your mind, they bypass your defenses, making you vulnerable to suggestion, instruction, and ultimately control. Next comes emotional amplification. Once rapport is established, manipulators deliberately trigger intense emotions. Joy, excitement, pride, fear, guilt, and shame are all tools. They know emotions drive decisions more effectively than logic. When a person feels exhilarated, they are more likely to follow instructions, commit resources, or defend the manipulator. When someone feels fear or shame, they become more compliant and dependent. Emotional highs and lows act like levers on behavior, making resistance increasingly difficult. Love bombing is a classic example. At the start of a relationship, whether romantic, professional, or spiritual, manipulators overwhelm their target with praise, attention, and affection. It feels intoxicating, addictive even. Your brain begins to associate the manipulator with safety, validation, and excitement. When the initial rush fades, it is replaced with subtle criticism, questioning, or withdrawal. This creates emotional whiplash, heightening dependence and reinforcing the manipulator's control. Another technique is gaslighting, which subtly undermines your perception of reality. A manipulator may deny events, twist facts, or reframe interactions to make you doubt your memory, judgment, or sanity. This isn't random lying. It's a systematic effort to weaken confidence and create dependency. When you begin to question your own mind, the manipulator becomes the authority, the source of truth. Manipulators also exploit personal trauma or insecurity. They may recognize unresolved fear, past abuse, or low self-esteem and subtly frame themselves as the solution. "Only I can help you," or "if you follow my guidance, you'll be safe," are common refrains. The more personal the hook, the deeper the grip. Trauma creates vulnerability, and manipulators know how to apply pressure exactly where it hurts most. Scarcity and urgency are psychological triggers often used to tighten control. Manipulators convince you that opportunities, privileges, or knowledge are limited. Act now or miss out. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Only insiders can know the truth. These triggers push people into impulsive compliance, reducing reflection or resistance. Scarcity doesn't have to be real. The illusion alone is enough to manipulate behavior. Another layer is identity manipulation. Manipulators often promise transformation to make you smarter, better, safer, or more enlightened. They tap into your desire for growth and belonging. But transformation comes at a cost: conformity. To become the better you, you must adopt their worldview, obey rules, and internalize their narrative. Over time, your personal identity becomes intertwined with the manipulator's system. Deviating from it feels like betraying yourself. Social triggers are equally potent. Humans crave acceptance, recognition, and status. Manipulators exploit this by rewarding compliance with praise, inclusion, or admiration, and punishing deviation with ridicule, exclusion, or shame. Peer pressure, collective reinforcement, and fear of isolation are leveraged to lock behavior into place. Once the social cost of dissent outweighs the psychological cost of obedience, compliance becomes automatic. Even subtle cues, tone of voice, body language, eye contact, are used to manipulate. A raised eyebrow, a soft smile, a pause before speaking. These create uncertainty, expectation, or tension. Manipulators combine these microsignals with emotional and cognitive leverage to guide behavior without overt commands. Your brain follows these cues almost reflexively, making you feel as though you chose to comply. Finally, manipulators exploit habit formation. Repetition, rituals, and reinforcement create automatic patterns of behavior. Once a routine is established, compliance becomes second nature. Rules, rituals, and rituals of confession or reporting embed obedience deep into the psyche. Your brain begins to associate participation with comfort and deviation with anxiety. By the time the manipulator applies stronger pressure, your behavior is already conditioned to respond predictably. The terrifying reality is that these tactics are cumulative. Individually, mirroring, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, or social reinforcement may feel like minor pressures. Together, they form a sophisticated network of influence. Personality traits, vulnerabilities, and psychological triggers are exploited simultaneously, creating a mental cage from which escape feels nearly impossible. Awareness is the first defense. Recognizing the signs, excessive flattery, emotional whiplash, isolation, repeated rituals, enemy narratives, and identity reshaping gives you the cognitive tools to resist. Critical thinking, supportive relationships outside the group, and deliberate exposure to alternative perspectives can disrupt the manipulator's grip. But the process requires patience, courage, and reflection. Control isn't undone overnight. Manipulators are patient architects of the mind. They understand your fears, desires, and insecurities better than you might. They use precision and subtlety, exploiting every weak point to build dependence, obedience, and loyalty. But knowledge is power. By studying these tactics, by understanding the psychological levers at play, you reclaim the ability to recognize, resist, and ultimately escape manipulation. This exploration shows a stark truth. Manipulation is rarely brute force. It is nuanced, personalized, and deeply psychological. By preying on vulnerabilities and exploiting personality, manipulators create a reality in which compliance feels voluntary, loyalty feels natural, and dependence feels inevitable. Once you see the patterns, the illusion cracks, but only if you remain vigilant, reflective, and aware of the sophisticated architecture of control. Breaking free from manipulation is neither instant nor easy. For decades, we've explored how manipulators infiltrate thoughts, exploit vulnerabilities, and create mental cages. The good news is that awareness and action can dismantle even the most sophisticated systems of control. Freedom begins with understanding the architecture of influence and ends with reclaiming your mind. The first step is recognition. You must identify the manipulative tactics at play, whether they are emotional triggers, social pressure, isolation, or identity reshaping. Denial is the first obstacle. It's human nature to rationalize behaviors that feel familiar or comfortable. But labeling manipulation for what it is allows you to take a psychological step back. Once you recognize the patterns, you can see where influence ends and your own judgment begins. Critical thinking is the second pillar. Cultivating skepticism doesn't mean rejecting every interaction or authority figure. It means evaluating evidence, questioning motives, and weighing consequences. Manipulators often rely on automatic compliance and emotional hijacking. By slowing down thought processes, questioning assumptions, and analyzing requests objectively, you reclaim control over your decisions. Critical thinking acts like a mental firewall against manipulation. Isolation is another major hurdle. Manipulators thrive in environments where your social support is limited or controlled. Rebuilding and strengthening relationships outside the manipulative system is crucial. Friends, family, mentors, or therapists provide alternative perspectives, emotional grounding, and reality checks. These connections remind you that your thoughts and feelings have validity beyond the manipulator's influence. Next comes reclaiming your identity. Manipulators often erode personal autonomy by reshaping self-concept. To counter this, reconnect with your values, interests, and boundaries. Journaling, reflective exercises, or creative expression can help clarify who you are independent of external influence. As you rebuild a sense of self, the manipulator's narrative loses power. You begin to operate from internal authority rather than external control. Emotional regulation is another essential tool. Manipulators exploit emotional highs and lows to maintain dependence. Mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, and other techniques help stabilize emotions and reduce susceptibility to manipulation. When you can observe feelings without automatically reacting, you regain the ability to choose responses rather than being driven by emotional levers. Education is a subtle but powerful weapon. Learning about psychological manipulation, persuasion tactics, and cognitive biases equips you with a mental toolkit. When you understand how influence works, you recognize its fingerprints in real time. Awareness diminishes surprise and vulnerability, turning manipulative strategies from hidden threats into identifiable patterns. Knowledge is armor. Boundaries are critical. Many people escape manipulation only to encounter lingering guilt, obligation, or pressure to comply. Firm, consistent boundaries signal that control has ended. Saying no, refusing engagement in manipulative scenarios, and prioritizing personal autonomy reasserts mental sovereignty. Boundaries are not rude. They are protective mechanisms for the psyche. Sometimes, escape requires gradual detachment. Manipulative systems often cultivate dependence through incremental steps. Abrupt separation can trigger fear, withdrawal, or panic. A phased approach, reducing interaction, questioning norms, and testing independent decisions, can allow the mind to adjust safely. Think of it as rewiring your psychological pathways, step by step, to regain freedom without collapse. Support networks play a critical role. Connecting with others who have experienced similar manipulation provides validation and insight. Shared stories normalize experiences that may have felt unique or shameful. Mentorship, peer support, or therapy groups offer both guidance and encouragement, reducing the risk of re-entanglement. Recovery is rarely a solo journey. It thrives in community. Forgiveness and self-compassion are often overlooked but vital. Many who escape manipulation carry guilt, shame, or anger at themselves for being deceived. Understanding that skilled manipulators exploit universal vulnerabilities allows for self-kindness. Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing the manipulator. It means releasing the internalized blame that keeps you psychologically tethered to the system. Rebuilding trust in yourself is the final and perhaps most important step. Manipulation often undermines confidence, making you doubt intuition, judgment, and decision-making. Each independent choice, each assertion of autonomy, strengthens the internal sense of reliability. Over time, your mind reconstructs a framework where your decisions are guided by personal reasoning rather than external coercion. Awareness and vigilance remain essential. Manipulative systems evolve. New tactics, social pressures, or persuasive technologies emerge constantly. Being proactive, by continually educating yourself, monitoring your emotional triggers, and questioning influence, ensures long-term protection. Freedom isn't static. It's an ongoing practice of psychological self-defense. Ultimately, breaking free is about reclaiming narrative control. Manipulators attempt to write the story of your mind for you, dictating who you are, what you feel, and how you act. Reclaiming that narrative means asserting authorship over your thoughts, values, and choices. It's the most powerful act of resistance, transforming victimhood into agency. Remember, the process is gradual but cumulative. Each insight, each boundary set, each emotional skill mastered chips away at manipulation. What may have once felt like a mental cage becomes, over time, a space where autonomy, clarity, and freedom thrive. By studying these tactics, understanding vulnerabilities, and applying deliberate strategies, anyone can escape control and rebuild their mind. Manipulators are not invincible. Influence is not destiny. With awareness, support, and consistent action, you can reclaim the mental sovereignty that is your birthright. The hidden truth is this: the world is full of persuasive forces, emotional levers, and psychological traps. They will always be there. But armed with knowledge, self-awareness, and discipline, you become impervious to manipulation, not because you are stronger than others, but because you understand the rules of influence and refuse to play the game blindly. Freedom of thought is the ultimate act of power. Once you recognize manipulation, resist it, and reclaim your mind, no one can control you again. Not fully, not subtly, not without your consent. That is the final victory: your mind, your rules, your life. If you found this insight into manipulation eye-opening, hit that like button to support the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video that uncovers the hidden truths around mind control. And comment below what manipulation tactic shocked you the most. Sharing your thoughts helps you spot these tricks in real life and strengthens our community of awareness. Stay vigilant, stay in control, and remember, knowledge is your ultimate power.